Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Jacksonville Jaguars decided the best way forward is without Doug Pederson, but for some reason with the guy who hired him. Also, the Jets may be going backward to go forward, and the Giants were the most surprising team on Black Monday.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
A lot of us assumed this was going to happen weeks ago. Doug Pederson now out in Jacksonville, but Trent Baalke remains employed, and we already have some reporting that that is a potential problem for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars and, of course, Locked On NFL joins us now. Tony, why was this what the Jaguars organization decided to do?
Because they're incompetent, that's why. And I'm not talking about firing Doug Pederson. I'm just talking about, Shad Khan said today, somebody said, why didn't you go for a clean sweep? And he said something to the effect of, what do you really mean, a clean sweep or a reboot? And he talked about the 85 people that would be fired in the personnel department and scouting and all of that, and says, I'm not going to do that. He said it'd be like throwing the water out with a baby, and he said it would be nearly suicidal. I just saw Washington do it last year. I saw Detroit do it 4 years ago. I've seen teams do it over and over and over again, and nobody died from suicide. So this is just an excuse to remain incompetent, and it's also the fear of making another bad decision and not wanting to do it. You know, you can do things wrong by committing them and omitting them. It's like committing them is an offense. Omitting them is something that you're supposed to do that you don't. And he just wants to sit here and keep passing the buck and kicking the can down the road, blaming everybody who, this is Jaguars. What they do is they blame everybody who left, but they always keep remnants from the past, and it never works out. And this ain't gonna work either.
Oh, Tony, I feel for you. I really do. It is a testament to what you can do in a position of power when you are in proximity to other people who have even more power and they like you. We see this in corporate America. This happens all the time. Trent Baalke somehow is dancing around raindrops, it seems, in Jacksonville, a fitting metaphor considering it's pretty rainy right now in North Florida. But so, okay, understanding all of that, who makes sense that you think would commit to a power structure like this? It would have to be someone, presumably, that doesn't have other elite options.
It would be, or an older coach, maybe like a Pete Carroll, or someone who's a retread like Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think you're going to get one of those young guys like Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson who has options. They all have options. It's clear that they're going with, they were talking about what the problem was. They were mainly talking about the offense being predictable. The funny part about that is they fired the entire defensive staff last year, and Shad has kind of passed that off as that's what Pederson said needed to happen type deal. He didn't say that, but when you do deductive reasoning, you come up with that's kind of what he's saying. Well, we were always under the thought that Pederson had to do something. He wasn't going to fire himself. He wasn't going to fire Press Taylor, who's his protege. So he fired the defense. Shad pointed out today that in 2023, they were 18th. They're now 31st. And he says, we just need to be at least in the middle of the pack. And I'm just thinking, that's what you were a year ago, dude. What are you talking about? You were in the middle of the pack last year. You were 9-8 for 2 consecutive seasons. You forced change. Change came in, and change did not work. So now you're firing the offensive coordinator. And he talked about the predictability. He says you can't be predictable. You can't line up and people know that what you're going to do. And I'm just sitting there looking at Detroit, and I'm sitting there looking at Buffalo, and it don't seem like they're trying to trick anybody. What they're doing is they're just beating you. You can know what they're going to do all day. Baltimore, you know exactly what they're going to do. Don't tell me you don't know what they're going to do, but they do it. So that, to me, that's a personnel issue. But make no mistake about it, Doug Pederson had his warts, and in my opinion, some of the things that he said in his press conference and his demeanor made it real easy for Trent Baalke to point the finger at him and say, that's the problem.
Okay, let's say Ben Johnson, it has been reported Ben Johnson would really like this Jacksonville Jaguars job. Mm-hmm. Is there a coach, could a coach come in and, drop him on the table and say, I'll come here, but you got to get rid of Trent Baalke? Is that something that you think management would even, the ownership, I guess, would even entertain?
Depends on who it is. If you try to just make Balky a salary cap guy, which I don't think that's what he does. He used to coach. He coached at some small school about 35 years ago, and he's always on the field talking to guys while they're doing the drills. I've done this for 20 years, and I've seen GMs at practice. I've never seen GMs at practice after a player does a drill at the back of the line, and then Balky's standing there talking to him, and the player's basically ignoring him. So to me, yeah, but that's not Shad's style, to be forced or bent to do something after he's already said this is what he's going to do. Trent is going to help with the search. Someone asked him today if Trent was going to be the lead. He said, well, I don't really understand what being the lead is. So there's a lot of, I don't really understand what you're saying when common sense tells you what people are saying.
Sounds like Bill Clinton testimony. What do we do?
Yeah. It sounds like is. It depends what is, right? But here's don't make me laugh, Peter. My stomach's hurting. But look, here's the deal, man. The dude says that they believe that, they have, he paraphrased basically, they identified what the main problem is. They're starting with the coach. Trent is going to be there. But here's the thing. They said the coach will report to me, not Trent. And then he says, Doug reported to me, not to Trent. So if he's your GM, and you're not here all the time, and you ain't really committed to hiring an executive VP, that means the coach is reporting to you and the GM is reporting to you. That's kind of a self ratio if you have a GM that's not the reporting official for his subordinate. That's weird to me.
You can stay up to date on the Jacksonville Jaguars by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Jaguars on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. You're Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, the Jets are digging up their past to move into the future. Before we get to that, the Cincinnati Bengals moved on from a handful of coaches after missing the playoffs again. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Looking at the wild card round, the Vikings are slight favorites on the road against the Rams. They're falling hard to the Lions. The Vikings, they got to go to LA now as the 5 seed. Get Minnesota favored by 1.5. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Bengals missed the playoffs for the second year in a row, which meant change was inevitable. Multiple assistant coaches are now gone.
The Bengals moving on from Lou Anarumo early Monday morning. James Betcher, Marion Hobby as well, their linebackers and defensive line coach, and also offensive line coach Frank Pollock. So 3 defensive coaches, 1 offensive line coach. Also worth noting that Zach Taylor was asked about Charles Burks and multiple in Kovacs as well, the safeties coach Jordan Kovacs, and no vote of, oh, they're definitely going to be here. And he said it's kind of dependent on the new defensive coordinator, that they would work that out with the new defensive coordinator, whoever it is. So a lot of moving parts. I would start here, Jake. And I'm at Paycor Stadium now as we recording this. I'm 2 seats over from where Zach Taylor was when he met with the media. And it was on Zoom as well because of the snowstorm we have in Cincinnati. And he said it was his decision. And that's what I think is where we should start before we dive into Lou and go from there. Is Zach Taylor owned this decision, said it was time for a change, said it was his decision, said he talked with ownership in the front office. And so this is Zach Taylor leading the charge here.
Matt LaFleur confirmed on Monday the Green Bay Packers will not have wide receiver Christian Watson for the playoffs. Reporting is that Christian Watson has a torn ACL. He has been their big play receiver since he hit the league back in 2022, then with Aaron Rodgers, now with Jordan Love. The Packers' yards per attempt falls almost 2 full yards without Watson on the field. They'll have to find a way to make up for it against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly on Sunday afternoon. And speaking of Philly, the Sixers collapsed against the Suns.
Kevin Durant, the Phoenix Suns, who are no way, they're playing well below their talent level, I think, to this point this season, without question. But they're going to play that game. back home, their first time in weeks back home. And Joel Embiid is going to miss that game because he's got a left foot sprain. Now, look, I have been banging the drum for Joel Embiid as far as the first half of the season, quote unquote, doesn't really matter all that much. It's all about what happens in the second half of the season and really around the All-Star break and right after the All-Star break, it matters. But not a chance to tough this one out. Not a chance. Especially when he'd been playing really well over his last 5 games. Yeah, the numbers were good out there against the Warriors. But as I said, a lot of those hollow numbers that he put up in the second half of that game, extremely hollow. And he can't play tonight.
And in Major League Baseball news, yes, there's that. The Cincinnati Reds traded for a Dodgers fan favorite, Gavin Lux.
Gavin Lux, I think kind of going back to him on this trade, I think overall right now, and I hinge this on those moves, what does the roster look like as we head into opening day with Gavin Lux now on it? But with him, with all that being said, I think this trade gives a B to me. Like, this is the kind of thing that if I were to give it a grade, I would give it a B with an asterisk. And the asterisk is really about how the roster moves, because if we're saying that Matt McClain is now the center fielder, I don't know about that one. I don't love that idea, especially with the health risk and things like that coming off of a long-term injury. How does that play out, especially now the fact he's got to prove he's healthy, he's got to prove he's a viable major leaguer, and then he has to learn a new position. I don't love all of that, but he was a good shortstop. So if you're telling me that that is where he moves and that we're moving Ellie to third base, I like it a little bit more, and I feel like it's got a little bit less volatility. That's the thing that worries me, is what is the volatility with this trade. But Gavin Lux as a whole, I mean, for the last 2 seasons that he has played, he missed all of 2023 with that torn ACL, but last 2 seasons that he's played, the WAR that he has accumulated has meant that he has been a starter. He's at least been worth a starting position. And as much as we have been excited about a lot of guys, there's not been a lot of proof of that on this roster. Gavin Lux feels a lot more like a solid plan rather than a hope.
I know it's early in 2025, but to say the 2024 Jets season didn't go the way they had hoped might be the understatement of 2025. It was not great. And now this team, without a head coach, without a GM, presumably without a quarterback, has a lot of questions to answer, maybe including why they're interviewing Rex Ryan, which is a thing that is apparently going to happen. John Butchko from Locked On Jets here to get us off on the right foot with that one. John, what is happening in New York right now? Because it seems like there is some grasping at straws right now.
Yeah, so the 33rd team, which builds itself as a football think tank, has been contracted to help the Jets run their head coach and general manager search. One of the people running this search is Mike Tannenbaum, who was a former Jets general manager who worked with Rex Ryan and hired Rex Ryan back in 2009. Mm-hmm. So
all of this is true, by the way. It just seems like it's absolutely made up, but it is true. It is, in fact, not a parody of the Jets.
The number of times on Locked On Jets I have to say I'm not making this up is really kind of staggering when I talk about something that's happening. I will say this for Tannenbaum is that I remember that 2009 search. It was a long time ago. It was a thorough search, and Jets interviewed a lot of candidates that went very deep. They interviewed a lot of candidates who they weren't really top tier candidates, who really didn't have much of a chance of getting the job unless they wowed in the interviews. It ended in Rex Ryan, and look, Rex Ryan obviously was not the long-term solution for the Jets. He was a guy with quite a bit of baggage, quite a lot of flaws, but the first couple of years they were successful, and in some ways he was the right coach for that specific team. So the buzz seems to be that Rex Ryan, this is more of a courtesy to him from the franchise because, he was the coach the last time the Jets were good, which was back in 2010. I think he and Tannenbaum have a relationship. I don't know why they need to perform this courtesy. I mean, I don't think the Saints are interviewing Jim Haslett. I don't think the Bears are interviewing Lovie Smith. So I don't know why this needs to happen, but I don't get the sense Rex Ryan really is going to be the guy who gets the job at the end.
No, probably not. But it does speak to, I think, a rudderlessness that seems to have taken over this organization, and taken over, maybe a generous term, right? Given how the last 50 years of this organization has gone. But all joking aside, I was trying to think like, okay, what coach with options would want this job where you don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback? We don't know the future of Devontae Adams in New York. And after that, it's just sort of like, well, other than this fan base is miserable, and if you win, you'll be a hero. What is really appealing about this job? What kind of coach do you think makes the most sense here, John?
I think that it's appealing from the standpoint that it's an NFL job, and
they're only 32. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, I think you can throw out the generic comments like that. I think aside from that, there's not a lot. I do think there's like a decent base of talent entering its prime because the Jets had an excellent draft in 2022. Even though they missed on Zach Wilson in 2021, they actually drafted 3 guys who turned out to be good starters that year: Elijah Vera Tucker, Michael Carter II, to Jamie and Sherwood. So the talent level is not terrible. It's a bad cap situation. The roster is going to need some turnover. You don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be. And the biggest challenge is the owner, who has become increasingly erratic. And after the season finale against Miami, he was asked if the season was disappointed. And I'm going to use that phrase, I'm not making this up. His answer was something to the effect of, well, it was disappointing, but everyone expected us to be good. I mean, we got scheduled for 6 national TV games. And he actually like pointed to the number of times the team was scheduled for nationally televised games to try and explain away the team being bad and why it wasn't a big deal. The owner has become very erratic, so it's difficult. Look, the job's attractive, as I said, from the standpoint it's an NFL job, and I think that somebody, and this always happens. There's always some guy who like gets close to it. It's their dream job. They talk themselves into their ability to manage the owner. The success may vary. What the Jets really need is they need the kind of guy they hired back in 1997, Bill Parcells, somebody who would come with authority, somebody with the credibility to tell the owner you're not in charge anymore, somebody with the credibility to stand up to the owner. The challenge is I don't know who that guy would be this year. If they had made a coaching change a year ago, it could have been Jim Harbaugh. 2 years ago, it could have been Sean Payton. I think the guy who fits that bill best right now would probably be Mike Vrabel. Now, I don't think he's on that level. I think the other challenge is that with what happened in New England, it seems like there's a strong possibility he's ticketed for that job. And I that was actually the one I had my eye on, because I felt like the Jets were desperate enough that Vrabel's been kind of vocal about this in the media, that he'll go anywhere if he gets to put his people in the front office. And the Jets are the only team with the GM opening. So the Jets are like the one team that could accommodate that. But now you've got New England, team he played it for, team where he knows the owner well, a team that has got a lot, a bad season, but has a lot going for it in Drake May and the high draft pick and all the cap space they have. So now I don't know where the Jets turn.
You can stay up to date on the New York Jets by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Jets on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Giants were the most surprising team in the NFL on Monday. Could you use some help finding subscriptions you forgot about, or that maybe you were paying for twice? It's happened to me. I've been there, paying for something that you don't use anymore, or you forgot to cancel it when you had the free week. Use that all up, and now you've been paying for something. Don't do that. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. I need the subscription tracker because I don't do a good enough job managing all that stuff. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. The Monday after the NFL regular season is always a tough one, with countless coaches being let go. As Ross Jackson and Matt Williamson discussed, it was the Giants who were the most surprising team for not moving on from their head coach or their general manager.
Matt, we were surprised by Gerard Mayo being fired, but there are some retentions out there that were a little surprising, I think, as well. We saw the Colts link arms with their head coach and owner. We saw the Miami Dolphins link arms with Mike McDaniel, and we watched, I think, maybe the most surprising for me, the New York Giants linking arms with Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen and saying that they're not making a change at head coach or general manager. Would you agree that that's the most surprising one?
Yes, especially Shane. I mean, that one I thought was Well, he might keep Daboll, but he's going to go and they're going to revamp the front office. I gave Daboll about 50-50. Although the last week or two, the Giants got a little more respectable. They weren't the worst team in the league there as they were for about a 10-week stretch.
That's true. That's true.
And I think that goes a long way. I mean, they were embarrassing for a while, and at least they ended on a semi-good note. I do think he's a good coach, though. I mean, at least he's a good offensive mind. I don't have a problem running it back with Daboll, and maybe I would lean that way as well, at least one more year. But I don't understand the front office situation.
I'm not sure what to make of the Giants. I do know that they let Saquon Barkley walk out the door, and he was spectacular for a division rival. I do know that they let Xavier McKinney walk out the door, and he was spectacular for a team that's now in the playoffs. And you can say, oh, well, they wouldn't have been spectacular. They wouldn't have moved the needle on this Giants season. And that's true. But you know what's really useful in a year, in 2 years, when this team is hopefully better? Good young players in their primes. I'm not shocked Brian Daboll got to keep his job, because I can't blame Brian Daboll for the Daniel Jones contract. I can't blame Brian Daboll for letting Saquon Barkley go. I can't blame Brian Daboll for putting together one of the least impressive collections of offensive talent in the league. And the defense was supposed to be better, but what are you supposed to do when this is the group you're trotting out every week on offense? I hate the way this team was constructed. The construction of the team was the problem. But you just brought in Joe Shane. So I guess they're going to let him run it back. And yet, if this team starts 2-6, doesn't it seem obvious that Brian Daboll is going to get fired? And then at the end of the year, you're going to fire Joe Shane? So why? For what? What's the plan? What's the goal? We don't know, but we gotta prove there is one. And finally, the Chicago Bears have cast a wide net on their head coaching search. They're even putting their hopes in former Green Bay Packers coach Mike McCarthy, potentially. Now remember, Mike McCarthy can talk to the entire league in a little over a week. And I am guessing Jerry Jones would love nothing more than to not have to fire Mike McCarthy and have one of these teams talk themselves into him. Ironically, I don't think the Bears are the funniest outcome for this. I don't think Big Mike wants to coach against the Packers twice a year. The funniest outcome is in New York. Aaron Rodgers out, Mike McCarthy in. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, between college football and the NFL, there will be a lot of playoff football this week. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.